Welcome to the Altis podcast. I'm your host, Stu McMillan. Our upcoming speed summit in Chicago finally gave me the push to, sit down for some great conversations. As I said in my last podcast with Les Spellman, I've been really meaning to do something like this for a while. This episode is no exception. This was a really good chat with a good friend of mine, John Griffin. If you haven't grabbed your ticket yet to the Altis Speed Summit presented by 3x4 Genetics, it's set to be what we're trying to make the most impactful speed event ever held. Over 3 days in early June, 6th, 7th, and 8th, we're bringing together some of the top coaches, scientists, and performance people around for some deep, hands-on learning, challenging the ways in which we think, train, and coach. Massive thanks to our sponsors, 3x4 Genetics, Stat Sports, 1080 Sprint, and Team Builder for making this event possible. Early bird pricing is available. I think I said in the last podcast that it's available until March 21st, but it's actually the 31st. I messed up there. Apologies. So early bird pricing at $399 until the end of March. Check out altis.world for details. So as I said, today I'm joined by John Griffin. His friends call him Griff. He is the director of performance for the Atlanta Falcons. I actually met Griff when he was with the LA Rams. When I did, he actually brought me in and was lucky enough to do some work with those guys. He works in one of the most demanding levels of sport, in one of the most demanding leagues, in an environment where every decision can impact a player's season and even their career. We talked about kind of, what got him into coaching, what drives him, what interests him, some of the challenges of leading a fairly large team now, which is pretty different for him, how his thinking may have evolved over the course of time, and what young coaches need to know about working in elite sport, specifically in the NFL. I started out by asking John, what does he do and why does he do it? Let's say you meet somebody, this happens all the time, right? Like all of us who work in the industry, you'll meet somebody that doesn't know who you are, doesn't know what you do, doesn't know your background, and you're talking about, you're just sort of doing the, getting to know each other. And he says, hey, what's your name? John. Okay, John. What do you do? What do you do for a living, John?
Yeah.
So I guess that's the first question. Like, what do you do?
Yeah. So I'm a coach in the NFL, specifically for the Atlanta Falcons, and work on the athletic performance side of things. So everything strength and conditioning, sports science, player availability. Myself and my staff are in control of pretty much trying to create the best environment to keep the players available and on the field.
Dude, you said that before. Like
Yeah.
that's Chris, man. Like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
somebody's asked you that question and you're back.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So you like you're a performance director at this point in your career,
Yep.
right? But it's interesting to me that you said I'm a coach. That's the first thing you said. I'm a coach, right? So you don't see because performance director isn't necessarily a coach. Yeah, you're still doing coaching, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
You're also director of performance, and you've got people that are working for you. You mentioned that you've got a staff. So what does that look like for you? Like, what is the difference between being a director? Is it a director of performance for you guys, or is it a
Yep.
performance director?
Yep. Food director performance.
Director of performance.
Yeah.
So what is the
Um,
difference? Like, you're
it,
coming
it,
from a
it's
coaching
it's
background.
not as different for me because I'm also going to act as the head strength and conditioning coach, so I still have boots on the ground.
Mm.
Whereas some of these positions can be so removed that they'll hire a head strength coach, hire a director of performance science, and they won't necessarily be in the weeds with actually coaching and training. I think it's always important to have proximity to the players, have proximity to, what got you to this point. So for me, like I'm always going to want to have boots on the ground to kind of get a feel for like what the culture of the room, what the identity of the room is, and how everything's flowing outside of just, managing processes.
How long do you think you're gonna have that want? Like,
Uh,
how old are you now? You're in your
I'm 36 right now.
36.
Yep.
Do
Uh,
you see yourself, all right, I want to coach until I'm 70. You want to be Buddy
shoot,
Mark.
man, until I feel like I'm 70. Yeah, I don't know
Yeah.
when that time comes, but I like it. I think just the organic conversations that you have, the camaraderie that you have, being part of something where you guys are all moving in the same direction and trying to build towards something. Obviously, every Sunday a game, Thursday or Monday, possibly in our league, and ultimately trying to win a Super Bowl. It's hard to beat that in other areas of life. So as long as I can do this, I'm going to do it.
So coaching is still what gets you up in the morning.
Yeah, for
Or
sure. No
being
doubt about
part
it.
of
No doubt about it.
it. Yeah. So why? So the next question, I guess, is why do you do it?
Yeah.
What is
Um,
it about coaching that
yeah.
really you're drawn to?
I think it's the impact of being something greater than yourself. Just obviously working with a collection of men and women in this field and driving the boat in a certain direction and trying to obtain a goal. Like I said earlier, there's something to that, just being a part of a whole, of working in unisex. And then also, a secondary effect is just having an effect on people's lives and coaching, like, you're helping people to achieve their goals as well. So that's awesome to see that come to fruition with guys that come in this league as rookies and say they want to, get Pro Bowls, or they want to get to a second contract, or they want to be a starter, and to be able to walk with them and help them out. And maybe it's just small percentage, 1%, whatever the case may be able to see that happen for people is amazing, man. And it just really fulfills you.
Is that always been kind of your motivation? Is that what
Yeah.
got you into coaching?
Yeah, yeah, and I would say it was other coaches that did that for me,
Yeah.
as a player, and I thought that was really really actionable. Whether it was the head strength coach or a position coach or a football coach, just anybody that really poured into me and gave me the inspiration to obviously be a football player during my playing days. I thought that was really cool, and I was like, you know what, if I had a chance to do that with some people, like everyone should have the opportunity to experience that.
How active of a process was that for you? Like you're coming to the end of your career, you can see into the future. You say, you know what, I'm not going to be an NFL player for long term. This is not for me. I need to figure out something else to do. Did you just kind of fall into coaching because you've been a player,
Yep.
what you know sport, or did you give this a lot of thought and say, all right, maybe I could be an architect, maybe I could be an engineer, but this is really what I want to do. Like I want to help young people like me fulfill their dreams. Like
Yeah.
how active was it for you? Have you always been the same why from day one?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it was. I kind of just sat back, especially when football's over. When I can get pretty hyper focused on something when I decide that's what I want to do. So
Yeah.
while I was playing with football, I would say that was my plan A, B, and C. Was I was all in.
Mm.
And when it was over, and I realized it was over, and it was time to make a transition and phase in my life with career, it took me a while. I'd say it took me a year to figure out what I wanted to do. First and foremost, I knew that I had years under my belt in sport. I knew that I had proximity to the sport, and I knew I had, in a sense, a leg up already in terms of I had the somewhat of the experience to be able to make that transition easier for me. So
Mm.
I knew that getting into coaching, whether it was position coaching or strength and conditioning, that I would already have, I wouldn't say an easy path, but I would already have some building blocks headed towards that direction. So it was easy for me to kind of look down that lane and say, you know what? I'm already kind of like 4 steps ahead in this direction. Let's see if it's something I want to do. What was difficult to decide is at one point I wanted to be a position coach, actually coaching football, just the
Mm.
game of football, and then strength and conditioning. And I was tasked with both options at the time. And strength and conditioning was so new for me. Just the realm of performance, the certifications, the education, the thought process that went into it, and the people that I was around in the strength and conditioning field were so intelligent and bright and had all this education and certifications, like I said, and they just came from different walks of life. And I felt like it was a challenge.
Mm.
Not to say football wasn't, but I had been accustomed to being around a lot of people that are football coaches or former players. It seemed, I won't say easy for me, but it seemed like a path that I was accustomed to my whole life, whereas strength and conditioning seemed like unknown, like something that I was venturing in that was going to be a challenge for me. With that said, I had already had, like I said, skin in the game, playing the game. So I felt that, hey, if I can dedicate myself to this profession and learn the education and the nuances like these people that I'm around, and also bring the aspect of being a former player in as well, I feel like that can make me, I don't want to say a unicorn, but it can make me pretty special in this field to apply both of those. And I pretty much had a long picture mindset. It's like, hey, I know it's not going to happen overnight, especially the educational side of it. But I really just locked in and dedicated myself to that, being around a lot of good people, especially my first job in my career that poured into me. And ultimately, once I, was able to learn that, it helped me be in a position where it's like, hey, this is something I definitely want to do. This is something I feel like I could be really good at. And on top of that, like I said, you get to coach athletes every single day, which is awesome.
Often, strength and conditioning coaches that played sport that become S&C coaches that may not have had the skills to play the sport long term, or maybe they did even play it long term and they just transitioned into being an S&C coach, had some sort of capacity for that work as
Yeah.
players. Was that the case for you? Like you really enjoyed being in the weight room, like S&C was something that was very interesting to you. And then
Yeah.
kind of, all right, this is like you're saying, you're more curious about it because you were super interested in that specifically.
Yeah, and I think one having proximity to it, you're familiar with that world,
Yeah.
and I was always a guy that was in love with the process, and someone that went from a position where I'm a very routine person. It almost went to a position where it became a lifestyle that even without the career of a strength and conditioning, just the regimen and routine of training and committing to the routine of working out, even when football was removed, it just seemed like it was ingrained as a part of my life. So to make a transition into that being a career, it felt seamless. It didn't feel like I had to do anything more than what I was already doing, outside of obviously learning about the field. And it was almost like a bell curve that I went through of obviously as a former player, you're confident slash arrogant, and you fall on either one side of those. You feel like you know everything.
Yeah.
And then you get around some really smart people and you realize you don't know anything.
Mhm.
And then you learn some more. And again, you feel like you know everything. And then once you learn more, you realize I don't know anything. So just kind of going through that, I've always been a curious person, intellectually. So going through that, it's been a fun ride. It's been a challenge that is constant and ongoing. I don't think it's a final destination of just constantly learning from people. And it's similar to how I met you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that process never ends. Like I'm waiting for it to end, but it doesn't end
That's
until
good to know, man.
yeah, get comfortable with it, dude.
Yeah.
I know the answer to this question already, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. So it's like, when did you stop playing? When you were mid 20s?
24, I want to
24.
say. Yeah, many
So
moons ago.
let's go back in time and we see 22-year-old John Griffin, and we ask John Griffin's teammates
Yeah.
at 22 years old, do you think John's going to become a coach, or do you think that could be a potential future for him? What would they say?
I think they would say yes. I
Yeah.
think they would say yes because
100%.
every off season they were always looking for me to run the workouts. So I was the guy that had the Nike tracker, the fitness app, uh,
Uh-huh.
the freaking Muscle Men's Health magazines. I had originally got into fitness through the bodybuilding industry, and that slowly transitioned to the fitness industry, and that slowly transitioned to the athletic performance industry. But I was always into it in some shape or form. So every time we'd have an off season, and I was with the guys, they would always, be like, Coach Griff got us. Coach Griff got us. And they would like joke around. And I would just pull stuff that I either did from running track or
Yep.
playing football or playing basketball. I played all three sports growing up. And at the time as an athlete, I used to just have a laundry list of the hardest workouts I've ever done and just put them in rotation. So there was absolutely no periodization whatsoever. It was just, go until you can't go anymore, take a couple of days off and go again.
I mean, sometimes I say that's the way to do it.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that, man.
Yeah.
Just work hard,
Yeah.
rest, recover, go out and
Hey,
work hard
yeah,
again.
no doubt. No doubt.
Yep. What did you transition right into NCAA? Like you went straight to Baylor?
Yeah, so one of my good friends, Terrence Ganaway, played at university. He played at Baylor University, and he was my teammate when I was with the Jets. And it
Mm.
was an off season where I was in Texas. I'm from Texas. He's from Texas. I had went to go visit him. Like, hey man, what are you up to? He's like, nothing, about to go work out. Tap in with me. So I had drove up to come hang out with him.
Mm.
And he was like, hey, while you're here, I want to introduce you to our strength and conditioning staff. And this is when I was still a player, and I got introduced to Coach Kaz Kazadi, Chris Roof, Andrew Altoff, Caton, Josh Nelson. All these guys was this performance staff at Baylor, and just kind of picking their brains. And I remember Kaz said, hey, what are you gonna do when you're done playing football?" And I remember I told him, "I'm gonna do what you're doing." And he gave me a card, and he said, "Well, when you're done calling, give me a call, and I'm gonna have a job for you." So it took about a year, but it all came full circle. I called that number, he answered, and he got a job for me. It was an unpaid internship, and that's how I got my start in this career.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
That's awesome. How long were you there? And was it just football, or were you working with other sports to begin with? Because you worked
I was
track.
working with all types of sports, man. I'm gonna tell you
Yeah.
that when I took this job, I didn't know anything. I didn't know what it paid. I didn't know what the job duties were.
Uh-huh.
I didn't know what time I was supposed to show up. I just took it.
Yeah.
And sure enough, when I got there, obviously in my mind, I thought, cool, I'm going to be training football players.
Mm.
Uh, but I actually wasn't allowed to coach within my first couple months because I had to learn, the Baylor art of coaching. I had to learn the reasons of why the programming was occurring. I had to go through the proficiency and the movements to make sure that I was coaching the movements correctly. So that in itself probably took 3 or 4 months just to commit to within that internal program. But along those lines, that once you learned all that stuff, we started off with other sports. So for me, it was men's baseball, men's golf, helping out with women's soccer, helping out with the equestrian team, and just pretty much seeing observing how can you coach these groups, how can you command this group, how can you program for this group, and once it deemed like you were doing a good job with that, then they would move you over and say, okay, you can take this part of the team.
Mm.
You do a good job with that. Okay, maybe you could take this position group with the team. And ultimately, I ended up getting a position where I was able to get hired full time, where I had what we would call level groups, where we segmented the team based off specific qualities that we were trying to build. But it was a intro level group was pretty much you're just building the foundation of every athlete that comes through Baylor and teaching them the foundation of the movements they're going to be doing in these other groups. So that was kind of my trajectory from when I started to where I got.
Okay.
But just coached a lot of different teams, man. It was interesting.
Other than kind of the technical foundational things that you talked about there, like what are the specific skills that you learned coaching athletes who are not football players that have helped you in the
Yeah.
immediate sense with football players?
I think one, I kind of had an innate skill set to do this already, but just finding different ways of communicating. Like it doesn't matter what you know, it matters what they know.
Mm.
So like you have to be a conduit for the athlete. If I know 100 things and only 10 of them get to the athlete, it's better knowing 20 things and 18 of them get to the athlete.
Right.
So at the end of the day, figuring out cues, what cue can this athlete relate to? Demoing, I hung my hat on being able to demo, and I was always taught as a young coach, like however you demo that, especially with some of these high level athletes, they're gonna mimic it. So if
Hmm.
you give a lazy demo, you're gonna get a lazy effort on execution of the exercise. So between demoing, cueing, analogies, and just communicating with the athlete, I think that was a very innate skill set that I kind of honed in on and developed, and it really challenged me to get better at that.
How's your demoing now?
Still pretty good, man. Yeah, still pretty good. I figured I still train. I try to do most of the stuff that our guys do. Obviously, I don't do all of it, but I get clowned all the time about like I look like a robot when I demo. Like, man, you don't mess anything up. But like those guys realize, how much of a important that was in my first job, man. I used to be practicing demos at night before I went into work the next day.
That's funny. My first mentor in this field was Charles Poliquin.
Yep.
This was like early 90s, and there was a few big pieces of advice that I remember from him. And one of them, and I wasn't living this back then, but was look the part. Like you're a
Yep.
strength and conditioning coach, you need to look like you're a strength and conditioning coach. And also meaning you need to be able to do the things, demo the things that you're asking other people to do. And it is. I mean, that is a big part of it, man. Like I
Yep.
think it continues to be. I'm 55 now, and I can still, like, I can do all the things,
Yep.
no
Yep.
problem. You know,
That
I
that's
don't
my
know how
goal.
long I'm going to be able to continue doing all those things. I joke that I can do them all 3 times.
Yeah,
So
that's all you need
that's
to
it.
do.
You know, as long as I
Yeah,
can do it
that's all
three
you need to
times,
do.
I'm
Yeah,
good.
yep,
And, I can still accelerate. I can still do all
nice.
the drills. I can still do all the lifts. Might be a little bit lighter, might be a little slower than it used to be.
Yep,
But I think it's still important,
yep. I agree.
I really
I
do.
agree.
Yeah. Um, all right, so that was Baylor. Then, like, let's fast forward a decade-ish. A decade later, you won the Super Bowl. What is the biggest thing that you learned in that decade that helped you become a contributing factor to the LA Rams winning the Super Bowl in,
Yep.
what's that, 22?
2021. Yep. 2022. Game was in February of 2022. Uh, I would say the humbling aspect of what you're doing is not as important as you think. And I think as young coaches, we think we have such an effect on the game, and our percentage of contribution that we provide in our heads is probably way more exaggerated than what it actually is. So you tend to overinflate your importance. You know what I mean? Not to say that it doesn't drive the needle, but just having that mindset of like, you know what, you're a resource for these guys and you're a piece of the pie.
Hmm.
And it only works as you see how it fits in with everything else. And you're one of the ingredients for the meal. And your role, you have to understand what your role is and how it fits in within the whole piece of everything. So, kind of understanding that allows you to perform your role at the best ability. Because if you don't understand what your role is, if you have an overinflated view of what your role is, you can be adding, to an analogy, way too much salt to this spaghetti dish, thinking that it's going to make the best possible meal, but at the end of the day, it's not. So realizing that, and it's a little humbling for some people, especially people that feel like they're very good at what they do. I think really put me in position to own my role, to own our staff's role, to basically say, hey, even if it's 2%, 3%, 6%, let's maximize this 6%. But not try to do too much. So, long story short, figure out what is your job and how do you do your job at the best possible ability.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. Do you think that is something that's specific to the sport and your position in that sport, like it being the most elite of this sport, NFL? Or
Yeah,
do you think that's something that, like, that's a message that even coaches at high school or college can learn?
I think every level you go, it probably is a little different. And when you get to the level that I'm in the NFL, a lot of these guys have gone through most of the development part when it comes to the physical development. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean there's not room to go. There obviously is, but I would say high school, you probably have much more an effect on the development of the athlete. Moving forward further in college, again, you probably do as well. Once they get to the NFL, there are things that you're going to put in position to continue to develop these guys. But at the end of the day, I feel like you're more of an ecosystem driver, and that you're trying to curate an environment for them to maintain or for them to do what they do more often, more repeatedly,
Mm.
rather than trying to get in there and actually tinkering the bigger, faster, stronger with these guys. And realizing that can be humbling, but at the end of the day, the minute you realize that, the minute allows you to do your job much more effectively.
Does that frustrate you at all? Like, it's maybe when you got into this field, you thought you were getting into doing a certain thing, helping people get bigger,
Yeah.
faster, and stronger was part
Yeah.
of it, right? And now you're, a decade later, 12 years later, and yeah, that's a part of it, but it's a very small part of it, as you
Yeah.
said.
Yep.
Do you struggle with that at all?
I don't, because I think at the end of the day, you have to realize what the main goal is. And the main goal for us is obviously winning football games, winning the Super Bowl as an organization. And then the main goal for a player may be, hey, I personally want to get a Pro Bowl. I want to start. I want to play 90% of snaps this year. So at the end of the day, if our contribution to that is keeping you available and keeping you on the field. Our contribution to that is maybe you had an injury that we returned you from in terms of return to play. It's still us contributing towards a one organizational goal or two a personal goal. So at the end of the day, if I'm still getting to the end of this road with you, I feel like that we achieved what we wanted to achieve. I think taking the ego out of it and realizing that I'm not the main driver of that, or we're not the main driver of that, that doesn't bother me at all. How can we help? What role do we play, and what piece of this can we help drive to get you where you want to go? And I think that I get just as much fulfillment out of that as well.
Mm, yeah, no, that's great. You said like your why is to help people kind of with their careers, reach their goals. Why for you is that in the NFL and not say in college? Why didn't you stay in college? Or why wouldn't you go into, say, high school where maybe you could affect
Yeah.
lives at a greater scale than you can? Like, let's be real. Like you're at the NFL level, everybody's replaceable. You can be replaced
Yep.
by the next guy. And it's really, for most people, most of the time, it's not going to impact most people.
Yeah. I would say when it comes to high school, when it comes to college, and I love both of them, and I love the development aspect of both of them. Just from working there, the times that I've worked, I think most people would probably be shocked how many people play football that may not necessarily love football. There's a lot of kids that are very talented and very athletic gifted that have built an identity in football since Pop Warner, and it's all they've ever known. And they get a Division I scholarship, and now they're a freshman or sophomore in college, and they realize the process that comes with it, the training, the study hall, the weights, the recovery, the class, the showing up for 6 a.m. runs. And they kind of realize, I don't think I love football as much as I thought I did. I think I'm just really good at it and I'm playing it. And
Mm,
that's not all of them, but there's a large population group on a team that consists of that.
right.
And if you're someone who is, extremely passionate as a coach about the game of football, extremely passionate about training, extremely passionate about the process, and you're speaking to someone that doesn't really have that same passion, sometimes you guys can be speaking different languages to each other.
Mm,
And you'll be upset at them and they'll be upset at you. And you feel like you're doing what's best for them, but at the end of the day, that's not what they're really passionate about. They just happen to be playing football because it's what they're good at. And they haven't really figured out what their calling is. I feel like when I got to the NFL, those people are far and few in between. And I would say most of the people you're working with are extremely passionate about what they do, or they wouldn't be there.
right.
Um, in terms of the routine, their approach, the mental approach, the physical approach, these guys are so dialed in terms of how they attack their profession that it makes you a better professional. It makes you
Mm,
want to wake up every day and let me make sure I'm crossing my T's and dotting my I's. Let me make sure that I'm learning, is this the best possible evidence-based practice? Is this the best possible programming I can be doing? Am I speaking to, the best professionals in this field to make sure that we're providing the best product? So when you work with those type of people, I feel like it raises your floor as well. So for me, working with the NFL population or any professional sports population, I just think that there's a lot more people in that profession that are all in, that are truly committed to the game of football, truly committed to the process, truly committed to training and everything that goes into being a football player. Not to say those guys don't exist in college, but there are a lot of guys in college and high school that play sports just because it's fun and I like what it brings and I'm good at it. But I'm not as involved as you are. So to them, come with that much passion and that much dedication can almost be met with like, whoa, what you're doing too much. Or like, yo, chill out, man. It's not that serious.
yeah.
And that can be frustrating. That can be really frustrating.
Now, so how do you deal with that now? Because yeah, it's the NFL, and you said most people are
Yeah.
great, but
Yeah.
there's exceptions. You know that,
Yeah.
and you coach some of those exceptions.
No doubt. No
How
doubt.
do you deal with those guys?
Yeah. I think you got to figure out what makes them tick. And once you can, remove all the BS and figure out like, hey, why are you doing what you do? And whether they say it to you directly or indirectly, you can kind of figure it out. Some people can be in this truly because like, hey, this is an opportunity for me to make a lot of money, but I really don't care. When it's over, it's over. And it kind of help your approach and how you coach them. So and it doesn't bother me as much. A lot of those guys, depending on how good they are at football, it kind of weeds itself out that they more than likely probably won't be on the team or in the NFL very long.
Mm,
So it has a way of kind of weeding itself out. And every once in a while, you'll come across some aliens who are just unbelievably gifted, who are probably from the future, who may not like football. But at the end of the day, these guys can kind of, coach their way through. But those guys are far and few in between, but they're there.
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, I chatted with Les Spellman yesterday, and one of the things we talked about was kind of his learning process. And, I remember having a conversation with him down in this event that we did in Grand Cayman a few months back. And we talked a lot about it. How do we learn? Because it's a small group. There was 10 or 12 coaches there. And we talked a lot about the process of how going through our careers. And his was pretty unique, I thought. Like, and he's always been this way, and I believe it. Like, he's given this a lot of thought. He basically learns through the problems that he encounters on his journey. So he just does his thing. Here's a problem in front of him. All right, let me figure out how to solve this problem. And then I work and I keep going down my journey. Here's another problem. All right, I got to figure this out. And he's almost to the point where he seeks out these problems. Like
Yeah.
that is how he learns, right? He's all right, here's a problem. Let me figure this out. And I'm gonna fail. I'm gonna fail. All right, there it is. I got it. And then he moves on.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a really interesting way of going through our career. I feel like I was kind of the same, but also like I see that as being like this bottom up emergent way of going through your career. And I don't think it's for everybody. But I'm the same a little bit, right? I'm most interested, even in my coaching education stuff. I tend to educate on the things that I'm most interested in.
Yeah.
I've got a problem. Let me trying to figure out this problem, the solution to this problem. And when I figure it out, I'm going to share it with everybody else because that's the thing that I'm most interested in. What I don't really like doing is researching a bunch of things that everybody else is interested in, but I'm not,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
that is sometimes important. And I
Yeah.
feel like, the structure of the education process is you learn all of these things and you apply them in a top-down manner once you encounter them in your journey. Do you have a process of learning specifically for you that works well with you? Like, is it
Yeah.
something, do you read every day and I'm really interested in this right now because of X, so let me go dive deep into this thing for the next 2 weeks to learn more about it? Or is it, all right, I'm now a performance director. I don't know what I'm doing. I've never been a performance director before. So I'm going to read all the leadership books to help me be a performance director. So what is it for you?
Yeah, I would, first off, shout out to Les Bowman. That's my guy. So it's
Absolutely.
cool to hear that, man, and to see a guy that successful, and him to say it's attributed to just failing a ton is cool.
Yeah.
I would say,
I don't know how much I believe him, by the way. I don't know how much that guy's failed. Like he's doing
yeah.
pretty good.
For me, I would say it's proximity to the circles that I keep. And it's the people that I hang around with, the group chats that I'm in, the staff that I'm around. The first and foremost, the environment. Every successful environment that I've ever been in sports has been a staff where you don't really even feel like you're at work.
Mm.
The day may start at 6, it may start at 5, it may start at 8, but before you know it, you look up and it's 5 o'clock at 6 p.m. And we're like, yo, we got to go home, and you don't even realize where the time went. And that's the environment and the culture that you're around with, guys. If you can match that with some really smart people too, in that type of environment, I learn stuff daily from the people I work with, man. And it's
Right.
been like that since I've been an intern starting at Baylor with that crew I had. And it was a very similar environment at that you're eating tacos while talking about ISOs, or we're going for a walk in our off time, maybe around campus, and just speaking about like, hey, do you hear about this new protocol for recovery? And this stuff just happens so organically that it's like you don't even realize you're like learning on the fly, but also having fun with the people you're around. So that was a big thing for me when I came to Atlanta, is like, how can we recreate that environment? One, with a group of guys that connect and we have synergy and we want to be around each other and it feels like a family and a culture. But at the same time, everyone in here has a lot of capacity in terms of they can add something to it. So for me, it's always going to be the circles that I'm around and the people that I'm around is how I'm going to learn best. Because they'll talk about something, I'll be like, that's pretty interesting. Tell me more. And it may not even be in relation to, our field. It may be finance. Someone says like, hey, I just opened up a Roth IRA. You guys heard about it? Nah, what's up? And we've been talking for an hour now. And it's like, yo, man, it's 6 o'clock. We gotta go home. Yeah.
So I spent some time with you guys in LA when you got the Rams,
Yeah.
and incredible staff, like really,
Thank you.
really good people.
Thank you.
I'm assuming you guys had really good people at Baylor. I'm
Yep.
assuming you got good people in Atlanta. Have you just got lucky?
I think so. I mean, it hasn't been like that at every job I've been. I know we just named off most of my jobs. Yeah, I've learned something from every job I've been at.
Uh-huh.
I think I have gotten kind of lucky. And I think to a point too, when you add certain people to those type of staffs, the people you add are going to try to create those environments too.
Mhm.
So, I don't always want to be like, hey, I'm hopping on this boat and I hope it's like that. Like at the end of the day, like there's a contribution effort on my part to create that as well. Whenever I join any staff, whether that's in as assistant or as a director, is like that environment is not by accident.
Mhm.
It has to be created. So at the end of the day, what type of environment are you curating and creating amongst your staff, either as a director or even as an assistant on the staff?
Yeah. Tell
So,
me some strategies there.
yeah. I think one is being able to have conversations about things that maybe aren't specific to the field. So it doesn't always feel like you're always on and everything strength and conditioning and this new research article came out and all that. Two, I think being comfortable who you are, allowing people to be comfortable, having hard conversations, being able to joke. I say it all the time. Some of my staff jokes around that they say before they put their shoes on in the morning, they'd be thinking like, what would Griff say about these shoes? Because I'm a clown everybody on my staff, man, just to create an environment. Like when you walk in within the first 10 minutes, like you're gonna be laughing.
Uh-huh.
It's necessary. I mean, we might walk to breakfast and I'd be like, hey man, why are you why your shoes squeaking like that, bro? And everybody's cracking up. It's only 6 in the morning, but like I think just creating that environment, just it's got to be organic. It's got to be natural. But we're gonna laugh. We're gonna feel comfortable with one another. Break down those walls and barriers, so that way, when it is time to have those critical conversations about things we want to do better or areas in which someone feels like I can improve or they can improve. It's not awkward, and there's not this weird tension just because of how close we are and the things that we're able to speak about. It can be said candidly or organically.
Yeah. How have you learned those skills? Like the job of a first
Yeah,
to fifth year NFL strength coach is very different than the job of a performance director.
yeah,
You're still coaching and these are still your colleagues, but now they're reporting to you. And
yep.
there's a certain set of skills now that you require that you didn't have a decade ago that weren't really that important to your job at that point. How have you learned those things?
I would say the people that I've been around. I'd say Reggie Scott was a great example, and I'm gonna learn from being in proximity. Like I said earlier, he was my boss in LA,
Yeah,
director of performance, and I thought he did an amazing job creating an environment like the one I just spoke about.
yeah.
So just having the opportunity for 3 years to kind of observe how he created that amongst the LA Rams staff, and then at the end of the day, like I would say the biggest thing that probably helped me out was being in an NFL locker room.
Yeah.
Just being around guys, like you're gonna have candid conversations, you're gonna get clowned, you're gonna make jokes, you're gonna talk about, something far left, far right. Like it allows you just to be a person. And a lot of times when you climb this ladder, this corporate ladder of associate director, director, but what I mean? A lot of times you can create these this distance in between you and certain staff members, and everything can become so political, and emails and Zooms and Teams and per my last email, and it can get very stiff, rigid, and sterile. So I think just going back to creating, like, at the end of the day, like this needs to feel like a locker room. Like we need to feel like we're close with one another, and we still have the ability to have that professionalism. But there's dexterity amongst our relationship that at the end of the day, it's like we're just two dudes too,
Yeah.
and we're conversing, we're having conversations about real stuff, and it doesn't always have to be strength and conditioning. But being able to knock down those walls and not make an environment feel sterile and overly corporate, I think is critical, especially in a profession like this where we're going to work a lot of hours and a lot of days together.
Yeah. No, that's well said. Um, Something topical. NFL staff report cards came out pretty
Yeah,
recently
yeah,
without mentioning any grades or teams or whatever. If a team S&C staff gets an A, what's the difference between that staff and the staff that get a F or a D? Like
mhm.
what in a league where every team's got elite talent, like they're all freaks. Every single player in the NFL is a freak. What separates like a good S&C staff from one that's getting the D's? Not necessarily, I don't want to say a bad S&C staff, but one that isn't as good as what you guys have at Atlanta or the staff that you had in LA.
Yeah. I mean, I'll speak on my opinion on it. I don't know if it's actually the case. I think at the end of the day, players just want to know how much you care, how much you care about the job, and how much you care about them. And are you pouring into them? Are you having conversations with them? Are you developing relationships with them, or is it transactional? And if guys just kind of come in, pick up a card, get their lift in, and leave, it comes off as transactional.
Right.
And you'd be surprised how much a conversation about a person's family can make a difference.
Hmm.
Something as simple as being observant and understanding your surroundings, and watching a player come in and go on the aux and put Rod Wave on. And then 2 weeks later, see that Rod Wave's performing in Atlanta. So then when he comes in, ask him like, yo, you going to the Rod Wave concert this weekend? And he'd be like, how you know Rod Wave? How you know I like Rod Wave? You know what I'm saying? It's like, I've been watching, man. I've been picking up on that. And
Yep.
I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, yeah, he's in Atlanta this weekend. You going? He's like, how'd you know? I said, I was looking at it, bro. I'm just checking it out. Yeah.
Hmm.
So like that right there, you know what I mean? That can make a player feel like, dang, this guy has a relationship with me deeper than just lifting.
Yeah.
So now when you go to him and you go to correct him, you go to give him an exercise, maybe it's something that he doesn't feel like doing that day. There's that little bit of initiative of like, I'm doing this off the strength of us. I really didn't feel like doing this, but I know that you mean the best for me based off our relationship, so I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
So I think just going from the league we're in can be very transactional. Some guys can be here for a week and gone the next week. Some guys can, be here all season, but at the end of the day, your job is just to come work out for an hour and then go to meetings. So I don't know if that's the case and why some of these teams are graded lower than higher. But at the end of the day, like you said, going back to the original question you asked, like we're coaches at its core, and our job is to interact with people first and foremost. And then we can train, the human, the athlete, the wide receiver.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, we're addressing people first.
Right. I mean, that's such an important point, man. It's that's universal, right? That's not just NFL. That's every sport, every level, every athlete. We are addressing them as human beings first. And I
Yeah.
feel like more and more younger coaches are missing that point.
Yeah.
You see that as now somebody who's coming into the kind of the middle of your career. Are you seeing that with younger coaches coming up that all right, they may have super great technical skills, but are missing out on that human element? Or is that kind of it's not a problem for you?
I would say so. I'd say that there's just so much more access to information now, and it's so
Right.
much easier to obtain it. Like I said, and I won't say I'm super old, but even early on when I started, there wasn't really AI, and in order to get access to a lot of research articles, you kind of had to have a collegiate email. So in learning things, you had to pull it from the people you were around.
Yeah.
Uh, Teach me this. Can I learn this? Nowadays, like you have so much access to information. And I think it's just very human nature for us is the minute we learn a technique, a periodization model, an exercise, we immediately think that's the most important thing. And we have an over fascination of the process and the system is more important than the environment. So I think that's definitely something that younger coaches, have to deal with, and it's going to be challenging for them. But like you said, we're dealing with human beings first and foremost.
Yeah, I feel like just like the players that aren't into it will kind of self-select their way out of it.
Yep.
I think the
Yep.
coaches are the same. You know what I mean? If you're not coaching at that level like that, you will not find yourself in this job for very long.
Yeah.
And we may have kind of danced around this already, and you may have already spoken to it, but somebody who like there's a lot of people that watch the NFL. NFL is a very, very popular sport. What is the biggest misconception about strength and conditioning in the NFL? And I feel like we said it's not a bigger, faster, stronger job. And
Right.
I know that I came into the S&C field as, all right, that's my job. I'm going to get people bigger, stronger, and faster. And for me, okay, that's a big misconception. That's not the job at all. It's here's the job. Is that the biggest one for you, or is there something else that I'm not an S&C coach in NFL, so I don't know. Is there something that I'm kind of missing that I don't know that I think is happening that's not?
I would probably say that is the one you just mentioned, and I know we spoke about it before. I would say that's probably is the biggest misconception. Not only is it confusing amongst fans or people that are in the NFL, there's still some coaches in the NFL that struggle with that as well. Of hey, this guy's not explosive enough out of his hips. He needs to get more explosive. He needs to get down there. He needs to start doing blank.
Yeah.
The windows and the time frames we're working with a lot of times are not, conducive of allowing an athlete to improve by the margins that a coach wants. A
Mhm.
lot of times, if you ask a coach what he wants a player to improve in, he's going to give you an example of a completely different player he wants to draft.
Right.
uh, so at the end of the day, that's probably one of the biggest misconceptions. I think there is still development that occurs on the NFL level, and I've seen it a ton in terms of guys getting bigger, faster, and stronger.
Mhm.
But as long as the season is and as chaotic and aggressive as these guys are week in and week out, it's almost like having a hospital on campus. And it's not a matter of if, it's when a
Right.
guy's going to get hurt. And these guys are master compensators and they're going to play through injuries and they're going to play hurt. And some of them are on contracts and they're not going to reveal that they're hurt, but you know that they are. So a lot of times, when it comes to that week 13, week 14 of a season, it's no longer about how much can I get this guy to squat? How can I improve this guy's rate of force development? How can I improve this guy's top end speed? It's how can I keep this guy on the field so he can continue performing every Sunday? Because that's going to give us one, the best chance to win, and two, him the best chance of having success.
Yeah. Truth. Last question. It's March 8th off season, in between seasons in the NFL. I know that there's no real off season. You're always kind of working. But what do you do to try to get away? Do you like are you able to disconnect the performance director, S&C coach from the person? Are you able to get away and just kind of be you and do some different things? And if so, how do you do that?
I know everybody says that to me, and everyone, is like work-life balance. How do you get away? Like, and maybe it's just because I'm younger, and this may change, but I feel more myself while working than I do when I don't. And honestly, like just the thrill of coaching, the thrill of a football season, the routine, the week to week goals that you're trying to accomplish, the camaraderie that you have with the guys, the challenges that present themselves, figuring out solutions, like building systems, being around the guys. Like I feel more like myself doing that. So honestly, when I'm away, it just feels weird, man. Like it just feels really weird. I'm bored. So I saw something a long time ago on a Reddit thread. It's super weird, but someone was like, you think about Batman and Bruce Wayne. Is Bruce Wayne acting as Batman, or is Batman acting as Bruce Wayne? And that's a question when you think about it. It's like, yeah, I don't know. You know what I mean? So
That's
I
deep,
think,
man. I like it.
yeah, yeah. So I don't know. Maybe
That's a
that
great
might
question.
change. That might change one day. But I get charged. I get energized being at work, man. Like I
Yeah.
feel alive, and I'm like, hey, man, this is where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah. No, that's an amazing answer. It's
Yeah.
I said this a lot, like work-life balance is a myth. And if you're good at what you do,
Yeah.
it's always like this. It's always connected. It really is. And you feel like you said, like this, you feel more yourself when you're doing the thing that you're really good at.
No doubt.
You're not. So
Yeah.
I
I'll leave
appreciate
you
you,
with
man.
I'll leave you with this too.
All right,
Going back one question earlier,
sir.
you were kind of speaking about a lot of younger coaches being very transactional in their coaching and you're not really dealing with the human being. I recently went to a talk at the AAPCA and I heard this coach named Dennis Logan speak. And I just met him that day, but there was a part of his speech that really stuck with me during his talk. And he called it alchemists and pool cleaners. And he said, when you talk about alchemists, he would liken that to just, performance coaches. So you look at Michael Phelps, a guy that's won gold medals over and over again, uber successful in his field, broken world records, probably one of the greatest athletes across any sport, probably has access to the best trainers, the best dietitians, the best chiropractors, the best PTs, anything you could think of when we talk about what we would consider alchemists, people that are pouring in specific systems, algorithms in terms of creating the best possible machine they can create. If we were to dump a barrel of oil in the lane that Michael Phelps was swimming down, would he still be able to win those races? Would he still be able to have those world records? And the answer is no. So at the end of the day, the pool cleaners, in a sense, are almost just as, if not more valuable than the alchemists that are, creating this engine that Michael Phelps is. So would implore more coaches to be pool cleaners. And when I heard that, I thought, that's the environment, that's the culture, that's the relationships that you would create with guys, that if that's not right, and you have oil in your lane, you can have the best program, the best periodization models, the best whatever, but you're not going to go very far. So I thought that was a really cool analogy he used, and it was just a challenge to a lot more coaches to be more pool cleaners and less alchemists.
Love it. Shout
Yeah,
out Dennis Logan. Good dude.
yeah,
Like one of the best guys I know in the industry.
yeah. Awesome,
Yeah.
man.
Appreciate you, man.
Yep.
Thanks for being here. Appreciate what you do and how you do it. Man, I love that conversation. It's always great to catch up with Griff and hear his thoughts on all things, honestly. Like he's just a really good, sharp, deep thinking dude. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Big thanks again to our sponsors of the Speed Summit in Chicago, June 6th to 8th, 3x4 Genetics, Stat Sports, 1080 Sprint, and Team Builder. They're making not only that event possible, even this podcast. I probably wouldn't be doing it if it wasn't for the event, to be honest with you. Or maybe I would be. It's, as I said, I've been talking about doing something like this for a long time. If you haven't checked yet, please check out our page on the website about the Altis Speed Summit. 20 incredible guests from all over the world talking about speed. It's going to be great. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you next time.